Oh, it is 7:38, and I am calling today's meeting of the Concord Municipal Light Plant to order. It is July 14th. The first order of business, well, what I should say is that this meeting is being recorded, and we are again meeting on Zoom for the extension of the executive order that the governor first signed a year ago. Has been extended to allow us to have virtual meetings continue for some time into the future, I think into September. So the first order of business this morning is the election of officers. The town meeting has come and gone, and it's time for us to change leadership of this team. So I will take nominations for chair of the light board. Does anyone either volunteer? Pam? Can't hear you.
You're muted, Pam.
How's that?
I can hear you.
Okay, I nominate Wendy Ravelli for chair.
Wendy, are you okay with that nomination? I can't hear you.
I know, got to get the etiquette right. I'm okay. Yes, I'm okay with that recommendation.
Okay. Brian, do you have a yes?
I would like to be chair.
Okay. So we have two folks who have either been or self-nominate for chair of the light board for the next year going forward. Thank you both for stepping up to do this. So our next job, I guess, is to take a vote of the board for a choice, a reference, for who should be chair. So let's see. Pam, we'll start with you since you were the first to speak. We have Pam, a vote of yes for Wendy. Wendy?
Sure, I just want to comment that, I had volunteered to do this because of last year and the short tenure that new board members have. So I just want to comment. I'm willing to do that in light of that change.
Great. Thank you. Let's see. Where's Gordon? Oh,
Okay.
there you are. Gordon, this is
I
a
would,
vote for Wendy, and we'll have a second vote for Brian.
okay, so have we seconded either motion? We have motions?
Sorry, we should second. So first, okay, so you're right, we have not. So on the recommendation for Wendy, do I have a second for that motion? Okay, we have
second
a
it.
second. And is there a second for Brian?
Well, I can't second myself, so
Okay, I do not see a second for Brian. So let's see. So the vote of the board seems we have one choice, and it sounds like a vote is probably not necessary. Is that your take on this? If we have no second,
I think you have to
we have
vote.
to do a roll call.
Yeah.
Okay, start with Pam.
I vote for Wendy.
Wendy,
I'll
Yes.
vote for myself.
Gordon,
I vote for Wendy.
Brian.
I would vote for myself.
Okay, and Alice, I vote for Wendy. So the vote is 4 for Wendy, 1 for Brian. I think our new chair of the meeting will be Wendy Ravelli. Wendy, do you want to take over from this meeting? We still have to nominate and vote a clerk for the meeting.
Why
And
don't
then
why don't you complete the
the election of officers?
Right, yeah.
Okay. So we next have the job of clerk. Do I have any nominations? Pam?
I nominate Gordon Brockway.
Okay. Gordon, is that something you would be willing to do?
Yeah, let me just make a comment that traditionally the clerkship has been a preparation for and a trial period for the chairmanship. This next year, this will be my last year, so it will not put me in position for being the chair. And so I'm willing to do it. I think that if the group needs it, I'm willing to do that work, and I'd have the ambition, although I probably can't promise, but of trying to get these minutes whipped into shape. So I would take some satisfaction in getting that done. But if the group thinks that there may be someone else who should be chair or have a shot at chair again, then I would defer to that person.
Okay. So do I have, Pam?
I just wanted to comment on that, unless you think that's not a good idea.
No, fine.
My comment is that I have a certain skepticism about traditions like that. I think we should be looking at the situation as we find it. So although I can see the rationale behind, the kind of heir apparent being the clerk, I think every year we need to look at what the needs of the board are and what the skill mix is. And so while I respect Gordon's point, and I think he's being very generous to make the point, I think we should, not honor those traditions without thought. So I'm not at all uncomfortable about looking at what we have in front of us next year, when the time comes, looking at the skill mix and deciding then what to do, recognizing that Gordon probably won't be on the board then.
Great, thank you. Yeah, that's helpful. Wendy?
So Alice, I want to nominate Brian. And I want to comment on this. Brian is in that role today and really hasn't.
I do not want the role.
Okay, so I'm just going to comment. So I do believe that it's very important that the clerk be in that role prior to being chair. I think it's very important because you really need to take and integrate the thoughts of the board. It's a very important role, and I think it's an important precursor to being chair. And I think it needs a full year of support to do that. So I think it's also very difficult to just walk in and be chair, having not been the clerk. So I respect Brian's opinion, but I also still think he's the right person for the role. And with Gordon going off, I'm not sure. Gordon, it's not against you. If you can help with minutes, great. But I don't think you should be clerk. I think it should be for the person who's coming in as chair from a succession planning perspective.
Brian, do you have an opinion about that?
I will follow up with members of the board to find out why they feel I'm not chair, because I do want to improve. I was chair of CAB and got a lot of positive feedback. When I took this role as clerk, I took it because I knew I'd be on this board for a long time. It would be unfair not to have that role. And I explained that a clerk is not my skill set. It's not what I do well. So I appreciate it, but I have struggled to find the time to be the clerk. And I'm not going to continue to make those efforts because the point of being clerk was to be chair next. But clearly that just didn't happen. So I do want honest feedback from all of you on the vote today.
So can I just comment, Alice? I don't see that you wouldn't be chair sometime in the future. I also think that you haven't fulfilled the role of clerk yet. You've only done 2 sets of minutes. We have a long outstanding amount of work, and I respect that, but that is kind of the role, right? And so maybe we need to talk about how to get some better support for that, and that's a separate conversation. But I just think, well, I'll just leave it at that. Yeah. I think you're still the right person for the role, personally.
Even though I haven't produced a lot of minutes recently.
Well, you know what, but it's a precursor to being chair. So if you don't have the time to do minutes, then I don't know that you're going to have the time to do the chair.
Oh,
so I just need to be able to do that.
Yeah, I think. All right, I
don't want to spend this whole
I know,
meeting talking
right.
about it. You asked for feedback and you got feedback. Right. And I think now is the time for reflection, not for a debate of what people think. So what I'm hearing is Brian does not want to be chair. I hear Gordon volunteered to be chair.
Oh, no, no.
I mean, not chair, I mean, clerk.
Correct.
Clerk. And so I think, given the fact that Brian has already said he doesn't have time or interest in doing the job, I think we have to let that sit and say he doesn't want to do it. Can't force someone into a job that they don't want or can't do for whatever reasons.
Well, how about if we say that I'll take the clerkship for a while and get the minutes straightened out, and if in midterm someone else wants to take over, then they'll be in a position to be the chair.
I'm sorry, but I will continue to make my observation and respectfully disagree with Wendy. I think that there are a lot of attributes that come into this, and just merely being the clerk, which I think is important and shows devotion and shows commitment, is not all that's necessary. I also, I hesitate to get into the merits here, but in the minutes, Brian, that you have done, you have really not reflected the requests of the board to make adjustments, and that gives me pause about
So, yeah,
I agree with Alice. I don't want to. We don't need to get into this, but
no. Please don't cut off conversation when you've made your point. That's unfair. It does happen quite a lot with this committee. I want to say that the minutes that have been done were 2 sets of minutes that we completed. I've got 3 others that I'm finishing off to get out to this committee, and they were long because those meetings had a lot of content. I did make adjustments according to the board. I also feel I agree with your first part of the comment, which is I don't believe the skill set for chair and for clerk are the same. I think they're quite different. My lack of skills is my ability to document, read, write. I mean, those are the English skills are not where I'm strong. Where I am strong is coalescing groups of people into group decisions. I did that with CAB quite well. I know 2 of the people on this committee watched those meetings and actually disagreed with me, but there was quite a lot of feedback that was quite positive about how I found balance in decision making. And that's what I hope to do here. I hope to, and honestly, I'm looking at the last month, and I didn't take some very good advice I was given, which was to politic and reach out to these to the this committee one by one to get support. I ignored that advice, and I shouldn't have. But it shouldn't require that to have someone become chair. And
I just want to say, Brian, we're not having a conversation now about a candidacy for chair. We have a chair for the next year. We're talking about the position of clerk. I understand you have a lot of emotion that you want to express, and I think there is time and a place for it. But I think right now we're talking about the role of clerk, not the role of chair. So I'd like to just, because of timing, it's already 10 minutes to 8, have us keep moving and see if we can get through the first agenda item, which is the election of the officers. We have a chair for the next year, and we have on the table a recommendation for Gordon to be the clerk, with Brian stepping down from the offer from Wendy to take that position. So I think I saw a second. Wait, do we have a second for Gordon for clerk? Well, is anyone willing to second?
Sure.
Gordon? Yeah, Wendy will second Gordon.
Yep.
A roll call vote starting from my screen. Pam?
yes.
Gordon?
Yes.
Wendy?
Yep.
Brian?
yes, thank you, Gordon.
And Alice, yes. All right, so moving forward, the Municipal Light Plant Board will consist of the chair of Wendy Ravelli and the clerk of Gordon Brockway. And Gordon, you'll have help from others if you get stuck at some point in completing the minutes, as we have traditionally been able to do for one another on this board. So thank you both for stepping up.
Okay, so I guess, Alice, this is where I take over.
It is. This is now
All
your
right.
board. Go for it.
Okay, great. All right. So Brian, I think you just spoke to this. I just want to review, there's outstanding minutes. So I think you said you had 3 sets. So that's March, April, May, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll expect that those will get distributed and we'll review them next month.
Yes.
And I know June June is last month. So will you wrap up the June minutes as well?
I have not received June from
Okay.
Karen yet, nor have I received for the broadband meeting we had.
Yeah, that was just last week.
But
So,
those are the minutes those are the 5 sets that I'll cover off on.
okay, I appreciate that. Thanks. And I respect that it is a tough job. And so thank you for doing that. It's not easy, I understand. Dave, I actually had a separate comment around the videos for the Minuteman Network. There are not recordings posted. The last one I see out in Minuteman is March. So I don't know if for April, May, and June, we can get those posted in the absence of minutes. And maybe
Yeah,
I don't know how to look, but
No, let me look into that. I did send them all.
Okay.
So they have them. I know
Yeah.
short staff, so they may not have got them posted yet, but
Yep.
I will check on that for you.
okay.
I have a setting on YouTube that alerts me when that page is updated. So you guys might look into that. But I have to say, I haven't seen any light plant stuff.
I believe they did hit Minuteman Network days after the meetings happened. So I'll check.
Well, I did go looking, so I didn't see them.
I
I
did
did-
find them on YouTube.
I did see
All
the
of them?
broadband one.
I don't know if all of them, but I know that shortly after the meeting, I think I went back and looked at it in one of our meetings and it was on YouTube.
Yeah, I know
Okay.
some of them are. I went looking for them because I wanted to see last week's meeting.
So,
It wasn't
But
so
I didn't
what-
find them, so.
Wendy, for last week's meeting, it was sent to them.
Yep.
They did tell me, they're gonna get it posted as soon as they can, so
Yep.
it probably isn't up yet, but they do have it.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
it would be great if the agenda could include
The
a
link.
a link. I know it's prior to when it's actually stored, but maybe there'd be some technology we could use that would sort of reserve a link in advance that it gets populated once. Anyway,
Well,
that's just an
let's-
idea. The other
Let's get
thing,
them. Yeah, sorry.
yeah, the other thing is just thinking ahead to if when we do stop meeting in person, it really would be helpful to me as clerk if I'll continue to have access to this record. And one of the great innovations I think that you did, Brian, was sticking timestamps into the minutes. That's great. We've never done that before. Thank you very much for innovating that. That's something that I'd like to be able to keep.
Yeah. The video record is very helpful when reviewing minutes.
True. Well, for the foreseeable future, we're meeting on Zoom, so we'll focus on just getting those videos posted for now.
Okay.
When we go back into person mode, we'll see what happens with that. I also just want to comment and apologize to the board for last week. I was unable to attend the broadband meeting. I was actually on an island up in Maine and did not have internet access because it went out and it just got restored on Monday. So my apologies to all of you, but Dave did send me the recording and I was able to view it last night. So thank you, Dave, for sending that as well. So appreciate that.
Can I just make a comment? I think I actually encouraged that meeting happen. And I was very disappointed that I couldn't attend because I was very much, I wanted it to happen. I had a similar problem. I was in Maine and simply could not make it. I, unlike you, Wendy, did not listen to the recording. If possible, could somebody send me that? Unless I can find it somewhere, but I think it'd be better if somebody sent it to me directly because I do want to.
I can share it with you.
Yeah, thank you
Google
very much.
Drive.
Thank you. And again, my apologies about my inaccessibility in Maine.
I can appreciate the challenges in Maine, having been there all last couple of weeks. So, all right, let's move on. Dave, let's move on to the, actually, just a comment. Our next meeting is August 11th, followed by September 8th. Just a request, does anybody have any conflicts with the August date?
Yeah, August 11th is problematic. I have a meeting at the same time. And we were planning on having E&E come in and do an update.
Yeah.
They conflict as well. So if we could do August 18th, that would work.
You know what, I can't do August 18th. Can't do that week.
So,
I can't either, so.
so in an interest of time, I'll send the board a poll. and
Okay,
Figure out a time that works, if that's all right.
okay. All right, that'd be great. All right, so we'll do a poll. And knowing that it's July, we will need to get that narrowed down sooner than later, so we can get it published. Okay.
Yeah,
great.
I'll get that out later today.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Appreciate it. All right, so now we can move on to the director's update. All yours, Dave.
All right, the 2020 audited financials are done. I'm going to distribute those to the board. We will go over those in the August meeting. So you'll have time to review them and then we can have a healthy discussion on them. The transformer repairs at Station 219 are complete. Everything went well. It was, they finished on schedule. We were able to test the transformer after the repairs and we put it back into service on June 18th. So we're back to normal operation. So that critical infrastructure was repaired and we feel pretty good about where we are with that. In terms of the middle school solar and storage project, we have issued a contract and a PO to a third-party consultant, Solar Design Associates, and we're in the early phases on that. So we'll be providing updates as more information comes in, but we're getting underway with that. We have a wind power opportunity in Maine that E&E is reviewing for us. It would be a 7.2 megawatt array. Wind produced just over 25,000 megawatt hours per year. The supplier's offering it at a 20 to 25 year deal. So E&E is vetting it and we'll come back with an update and or recommendation to the board probably in August. But again, looking for more renewable sources that would come with the renewable energy credits. We took receipt of a new bucket truck last month. This replaces a truck that's 20 years old and it will be put into service in the next couple of weeks. On July 6th, Paul Goffin started as our third customer service representative. He's been with us for a little over a week, but he's definitely off to a strong start. So that team is now complete. And we started the interviewing process for line workers last week, and we'll continue with that process with hopes of filling the vacant positions. And that's my update.
Okay. Brian, I saw you had flipped your hand up when we were talking about wind. Did you have a question?
Yeah, so Dave, you said there's 7.2 megawatts of wind potential. First off, it's wonderful E&E has found another renewable project. That's a strong desire of this committee. But the other question is the 7 megawatts, is that the full scale of the project? Is that being something you see being offered to Concord Light alone, or would E&E distribute this amongst many MLPs?
So it would be to CMLP and or one other party. So, that's some of the stuff that we're working through. But we have some questions that we want answered, and E&E is going to dig into it for us. But I did want to alert the board that there's an opportunity and, we'll bring it back to the board and look for input. But, we're excited that another one is.
Sorry,
Oh.
Gordon?
Yeah, David, how are we doing on, generally speaking, do we have a lot of open seats, open recs for jobs throughout? Well, are there any open recs for broadband? Are you fully staffed right now?
No, we're not fully staffed, and that we'll talk about that when we get into the broadband discussion. But
Okay.
we do have some open positions there.
And the open positions in the electrical business is basically the customer service reps.
Customer service rep team is full right now. Paul, who started on the 6th, completed that team.
Yep.
So that's full. We have a couple line worker positions open that we're recruiting for. And as I've mentioned in the past, those are tougher positions to fill.
Yep.
But we have them posted open until filled. And as we get candidates that are qualified, we interview them and, see where they are. On paper, some of them look good and then they aren't. And so it's a process and it's been that way for years.
And we have how many open positions for the line workers?
We're looking for 2 line workers right now.
2 line. Okay, thank you.
Are we salary competitive? Is that the problem that we're having, that we're finding that the salary we're offering is just too low for the quality of service that we're looking for?
Yeah, I'm actually currently looking into that, doing a salary market comparison. So I don't have the data complete on that yet. But really, the main issue with line workers is supply and demand. It's a specialized trade, and there's not a lot of people out there jumping into that market. So that's been that way for 20 years, and it continues to be a challenge.
And so we might also have a market equity issue too. So if you do have to raise the salary, then you've got other potential cost implications, right?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah,
We're-
and that's why we're looking at that right now.
Right, I assume
Where
so.
we are.
Right.
And we regularly look at that, every 2 to 3 years to make sure we're in market. And it's been 2.5 years. So
Right.
that could be an issue, but
Yep.
I don't want to speak to that until the research is
Yeah.
done.
Correct.
One more question if I can.
Yep, Al?
Dave, can you tell us a little bit about what the solar design consultant scope is? Like, what are they going to do for the middle school?
They're going to be looking at, doing a study feasibility, how much we can get out there, kind of doing a rough design, some battery storage. It's the start to the project so that when we are completed with them, we have something that we can put into a bidding document for people to come put a bid in and evaluate.
And will they help define whether it's a PPA or a town-owned thing, or are they just doing the technical design?
I think it's the technical design. We need to look at the financial piece of it and figure out, how we want to fund it, and whether it's a PPA or an owned array.
Okay.
I think our preference is an owned array at this point, but that could change.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So Dave, I'm just going to ask for your assistance if there's questions that people raise. I always have a hard time seeing it. So if there's a question from the audience, if you could help point that out, that would be great. I don't think I see one right now, but all right. Okay, so.
So
Sorry.
Wait, no, actually, there are questions.
there are some questions, but I just wanted to let you know, I emailed the board the YouTube links for the last 2 meetings. So they are posted, they are up there. And Mark, I'll also put that in the Q&A. But yeah, I don't think there's anything from the Q&A. There's a direct question.
Yeah, and I guess maybe what I should have said was raised hand, because I think one of our protocols is the Q&A question and answer. We're not, I don't know what that, Alice, your approach was on managing that. So I'm not reading the Q&As as they're raised, but if it's the raising hand.
Yeah, it wasn't available in the past.
Yeah, and it's available today. I'm not sure why we had some technical issues in the beginning. But Pamela does have her hand up. It's been up for a little bit.
Okay. So Pamela, can you speak? Yeah.
I would like to request that I'm sorry, I'm angry because we cannot, as the audience, see who is participating. We have no access to reactions or participant numbers. And that's not an open meeting when the participants can't see each other, at least. The select board does it with everybody having our own windows, not this webinar thing that the light board is using. I recognize that there's maybe issues with Zoom bombing, but the select board, the planning board, the zoning board of appeals all do it the other way.
So, Pamela, thank you. I'm going to ask Steve that we have some town-wide standard around Zoom. I think that's appropriate. So I hear your concern. We can't change today's session. I do see that there's 12 panelists and 13 attendees, but I think I've heard that comment before, and I think we'll take it offline and try to address it for the next meeting. But I hear you. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Pamela, if it would help, I can read off. There's one phoned in one that I can't identify.
Right.
Andy Putrick, Courtney Whalen, David Allen, Gail Heyer, Jim Terry, Joe Repoff, Carlin Reed, Mark Howell, Matt Johnson, Pamela Dritt, Susan Bates, and V. Carl.
Thanks, Gordon. All right. Okay, so with that, I don't see other raised hands.
You got one from me.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, I just wanted,
Yep, Pam.
I find this very meaningful. I really, having heard this list of people, I was looking to see who the participants were. I didn't see those people. And I just want us to change this if we can, because it affects the quality of our engagement with the public, big time. So.
Right.
All right.
So I believe, Pam, if you click on this, and this on the bottom of my screen is our participants link. And if you click on that, it will open a window to the right. And then there's 2 folders you can look at. So for now, take that approach. You're muted, but we'll obviously.
I only see 13 attendees. That's all I see.
Yeah, that's all I
Okay.
see.
So I don't see the other, there are a number of people who are, it's important for us to know are listening in, and I don't
Right.
see them. Okay. All right.
So,
Well, no,
okay.
that's everybody. It's like 12 panelists and 13 attendees. That's it.
You're viewing the panelists, Pam. You're seeing them on your screen. It's the attendees that you can't see are listed as the 13. So, okay, let's move on, because this
Move on.
is technical.
Yep, sorry.
All right, so Dave, thank you for the update. Let's move on to the broadband network update.
Right,
I don't
so, Greg, why don't you kick off your update and then we'll go from there.
Okay. Being the first official update, I'd broken it down into just general numbers, talk about the past of COVID, since those numbers have not been on this board, personnel, and then basic projects. And then, of course, I'm more than open to getting feedback from the board for future meetings. So right now we have a total customers, active accounts of 1,495 customers. Breaks down to 1,379 residential and 116 business customers. Backlog update. After we did our full numbers, went back and looked at the backlog. We had come up with a total, after filtering out all duplicates, et cetera, about 419 customers in the backlog due to COVID and the moratorium placed on installations. As this board probably is aware, we focused strictly on new move-ins, EDU, medical, first responders during the COVID pandemic and during the moratorium. So those people were still being installed during this past year and a half. On the personnel level, we have started the formal process to hire a 4th field technician and a 2nd network engineer. So we hoping that's going to bring those people on hopefully in the next 60 to 90 days.
Are those posted, Greg? Are you actively recruiting, or did you just post them?
They're going to be posted. I have already had the technician position already done, doing editing and everything. It was going to be posted literally prior, right the day of the outage, and obviously my priorities changed quickly.
And do you think you have challenges like Dave does on the line workers, that they're hard to recruit, that this could be elongated recruitment?
I don't know, to be honest.
Okay.
But I think that we have a lot of networking going on in the industry, so we'll definitely post and see how that
Okay.
As far as broadband projects, we have 5 major projects strictly related to broadband. Our first one is we're evaluating the network, and in the process of getting recommendations, going through talking as a team internally, talking to outside consultants, and working with our own network engineering team to look at the updates and upgrades that are appropriate for the network. We are in the process of migrating all the GIS data off a third-party application and bringing it over to the town's GIS mapping. We've hired a consultant who has spearheaded the overall town GIS project, and we are now bringing in all the fiber, so it will, all the fiber mapping and everything will be done through the GIS, and it will then be in one application, which will be next to the electrical, DPU, et cetera, all the utilities. We're also in the process of automating service orders. Right now, the way it works on the electric side, the service orders are generated to the technicians automatically once the account is created. That process also being done now on our side, on the broadband side. So previously, we didn't really open up a customer account until after the installation was complete. But then we didn't have much tracking to say why wasn't that customer completed. We just have records that we may have gone out and then the installation wasn't completed. This way we will have captured with that customer exactly the reason why, so we can look back and see as broadband becomes available in certain areas, et cetera, and what the issue may have been. So we will be able to have a better database tracking as to looking at every address and specifically why the installation may or may not have occurred.
So Greg, for your 419 backlog, did you open a service order for all of those so they're easy to track currently?
No, we mapped them. We're using cluster mapping. That's part of working with Jill, who's our GIS person. But we have not opened up 14. No, we actually did a quick survey. We have people who have moved, businesses that are not in town anymore, et cetera. So we just, looking at that backlog, we're now we've been in the process of contacting people. We're starting walkthroughs, and we're going to just attack them, as efficiently as we can.
Alice, you had a question with your hand up.
I do. Since we're talking about the backlog, I'm just curious, do we have the in-house capacity to handle the entire 419 in the backlog, or are we looking to perhaps hire consultants to help us move that along more quickly? Folks have been waiting for about 18 months for installation.
Yeah, so we're looking at outside companies to do like drops to the homes, et cetera, and we're going to use cluster mapping so we can put that contractor out there and attack it efficiently, not just first come first serve, but we're also prioritizing first come first serve.
Okay.
Thanks, Greg. Keep
Thank
going.
you.
Brian, I guess question.
Yeah.
You have
Oh, sorry, Brian.
When do I get to ask the question? So one of the things from our broadband meeting was you were going to have 2 follow-ups during this meeting. Will you do that during the update, or will you do that during the committee discussion?
That's going to be during the committee discussion.
Then I'll wait.
Okay.
Right.
No, I think we should do it during this discussion.
During this?
Right,
Okay.
can we just let Greg finish and then his update, and then let's come back to that at the end? I agree with you, Dave. And then Gordon, did you have your hand raised with a question?
No.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Greg, why don't you keep going?
Okay. Another project is we're reviewing the terms and conditions. In the process of doing that, trying to just bring them up to date. We're reviewing other municipalities and other private offerings and trying to align our policies and terms and conditions, falling more in line with the industry. And our last is we're doing a full fiber inventory of the entire town. We are literally in the process of looking at all open fiber, testing it, labeling it, or documenting it in a database to know which fiber, any repairs that need to be made, any, just so we can set up a maintenance program going forward and put it as a ongoing maintenance process throughout the year. So we're hoping we'll know our inventory with what, because we know we have some broken fibers, some compromised fibers here and there. So we're going to document each and every fiber.
Great. So Greg,
Greg,
last month you mentioned something about doing a survey. What were the results of your survey? Because you had projected that you would have a backlog of about 375. It didn't look like you have that backlog now.
Okay,
Can you
no,
tell me what
right,
those
so
findings were?
in that survey, we did complete the survey, sent out emails to everybody we could. It's a lot of the broadband, a lot of people neglect to put their email in. We did the survey. We received out of the 400, well, probably about 379 actual people that were surveyed. We received a positive of 151 and a negative of 25 for various reasons. If I extrapolate those numbers, our backlog comes out somewhere between 330 to 350 people.
Okay. And when you say negative, does that mean you think they're not going to pursue the installation?
They absolutely, yes,
Okay.
they responded with a negative that they're no longer interested
Okay.
in broadband.
Okay. And is that just because of the delay and they found a different solution, or did they not give any insight?
So they did give some insights. Some found another solution. Some don't live in town anymore. Some businesses have moved out of town.
Okay. Okay. All right. It's helpful. Great. Does the board have questions on that update? Okay. So now maybe, Dave, this is a good time to do the follow-up from last week's meeting in terms of your, I think it's not the backlog, your after hours report. I don't know that that's ready today, but also you had some actions around a third-party consultant assessment. So I don't know who should speak to that.
Yeah, so I mean, I can speak to some of it, and Jason Bulger, our CIO, is on as well, and he can
Great.
jump in. But I did receive the after action report early this morning. Haven't had a chance to go through it yet, obviously, with this meeting, but that will be something that I look at later today. But we have, identified some tasks and things like that we know we need to address. From an infrastructure standpoint, we need to replace all end-of-life equipment. And so we're working on, what needs to be replaced, and make sure everything's up to date with firmware on all equipment. So we did identify, obviously, a network engineer that Greg mentioned, getting another network engineer in here. We had launched that recruitment before the pandemic hit. We had interviewed a bunch of candidates, had one that we were going to bring in, and then we kind of got shut down with the pandemic. We actually hired that person, 9 months later, and then our other network engineer moved on. So, we were in a position of having two on board, but we know that's a big issue for us. So we're going to, continue with that. But we also, even if we have two network engineers on board, we do want to have a third party there that's familiar with the system that can help those two network engineers really troubleshoot and work together. So it's not just, one or two engineers working on it. So those are some big tasks that we need to, jump on. We also identified, some training levels on some of our specialized software that, we need to train the entire staff, not just, Greg or our network engineer, but we really know that we need to get the technicians trained better. And so that's been a key takeaway that, I've identified and am looking to have those folks come to us and train us on our systems. That's something that we didn't necessarily budget for, but it's something that needs to happen either way. So, we're going to be doing that. Looking at the outage itself, we definitely need to establish some procedures on reaching out to vendors earlier on in the process. That's a key takeaway of something we did poorly. And I think someone mentioned at the special meeting about an incident response plan. We've never had one, and the person that mentioned that is right. That's something we need to put together. So that's something that will be happening. I think those are some of the big things. You know, we need to document things a little better as we go through these processes. You know, it was a big event with a lot of takeaways. I just touched on a couple of them. But I will say that we have been meeting with vendors, and that process has been helpful. And I'm going to let Jason speak to that a little bit. And then you guys can ask questions after if you'd like.
Yeah, I'll just mention that during this, we tried to leverage all the resources we possibly could, both from a troubleshooting perspective and an analysis of the architecture that was in place there. I think we've had now 8 network engineers, all certified people whose average tenure is probably 20 years in networking. Take a look at this just to make sure that we're on the right page, that we're in the right direction, that the replacements that were planned and that we'd like to do are in line with best practices and are going to have a high level of resilience in this design. All of them echoed a similar sentiment, which was that there were some things that were not really done in a standard way in this environment, in terms of the way that certain VLANs were set up and in the terms of how certain devices were connected, in terms of which services were running or not running. So, it was good that they all had a consensus as to what some of the issues were. It's kind of consistent with things that we've seen around the network in general and some of the systems. So I do feel like we're on the right track, and it is good having those resources, both for emergencies, but also to know that this is vetted against industry standards.
So Jason, did you get a formal report from these? It sounds like you had 8 different groups, and was it?
So there were 3 different groups, and each of them have a handful of engineers looking at this. And we did get a couple of formal reports in the form of very specific bulleted recommendations, and then some more general verbal reports because of the timeliness of the situation. This wasn't really information to go off of to architect. This was just making sure we're in the right direction. And that will come next in terms of these are the formal recommendations. So we now have reached out to 3 different vendors and are getting their designs for what a good replacement would be for some of this end of life equipment.
So it's targeted specifically on sort of this event and the end of life equipment. It's not the larger whole architecture with software and hardware
No, it is.
together.
It's everything. Yeah, and that
Okay.
that had begun before this incident and was underway. The network engineer and Greg and myself had all knew that these pieces of equipment need to be replaced, and steps were taken to move in that direction. But we wanted to make sure that we had every set of eyes possible on this design, that this wasn't just something that our network engineer and Greg and myself came up with, that this was a design that was going to withstand scrutiny from a lot of different people at the broadband, critical infrastructure level, not just an operation, for a few hundred people.
Good. That's good to hear. Alice, did I just see you raise your hand? You're on.
Can't hear
You're
you.
not. You're muted.
Thank you. I'm wondering whether Dave or Jason or Greg would be able to provide the board with basically a work plan, as you start reading through the AAR and what your next steps are, to provide the board through that working document so that we know which items are being taken up and at what timetable and who's responsible for them, so that we actually have that work plan as well as the one that you're going to be working from. It helps us stay on top of what's happening at in the broadband side of the business, and it'd be helpful, I think, for us to have a conceptual design of what you're going to be doing next. I took a lot of notes about the things that you're looking at. There's a lot of stuff, I know. Most of us are not as technically capable as you are, so it'd be great to have it so that we can follow up, do a little research, and make sure we're on top of the repairs and upgrades that you're looking at. I don't know if other board members agree, but for me, that seems
No,
important.
I appreciate it. And I'm sure there's budget implications too, but if it's the right thing to do, we obviously need to do that, right? So, Pam?
Yeah, I just, well, I agree with Alice. The experience has been instructive to me. I mean, there's the old expression, crisis creates opportunity and insight. And I think good that what happened has caused a lot of stuff to bubble to the surface and become articulated. A couple of comments. One is that I think it would be useful to know why these seem like very basic systemic things. And it'd be nice to just kind of reflect on why they weren't caught earlier. And that's not an indictment. It's just, what is there systemically inside the way things are being managed that let that happen. And I don't say that critically. I just say I think it would be a useful exercise to see, what was it that enabled this to happen at a more fundamental level. The second thing relates to what Alice said, I guess. I was struck by, and you were right, Dave, when you warned us in your message that, this is highly technical. I think finding a way to put things into plain English on issues like this is extremely important. And I think that I wish I had the technical skills you do, but I encourage those of you who can do it to think about communications on important issues like this in plain English. And I think Alice's request includes being sensitive to the need to put things into plain English at the executive level and the kind of policy guidance level. And the last thing I would ask is that it kind of took me by surprise. There had been so much discussion about broadband. We were all so aware of how it's an important initiative and project. But I don't remember us being given a heads up that these issues existed. For example, it sounds like, you were aware of some things going on, you knew we want to help to the extent that we can. And so I just encourage us in this reporting that's going to happen regularly on broadband, that you say to the board, here's some stuff that makes me really nervous. Here's some stuff that may be a tripwire. And, so I'm just inviting you to include that always in your updates. So plain English,
Risks.
problem identification up front, and also look at the systemic reasons why this may have happened. And I say that respectfully and with humility, because I'm not a technical person.
Great. Gordon, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, those are good points, Pam. It's almost like as if you could say an element of the after action review could include like some reflection on what the board should have done.
Yeah.
What it can do going forward in order to help support this. It's like sometimes these meetings have the sort of the tenor of, the board, like, I don't know, blaming or something like that. And that's not where I'm coming from. It's like, actually, here's an example of how the board can help. One is to make sure, and we've made a commitment to do this, make sure that we actually consider broadband in every meeting. But another one is to keep an eye on hiring. And I mean, we get reports about hiring, but also as board members to think about, okay, are we where we need to be in terms of headcount? And, have open positions gone open for too long. But those are just two things to come to mind. As you're working on this after action review, staff, think about how the board can help. And, it's like, maybe you don't really want a lot of help, but we're actually here to keep an eye on the steering of the ship. And anyway.
Brian?
Yeah, so just to build on Gordon's comment, I think one of the failings is this board has not talked about broadband at many meetings up until Article 41 came about. I think we've agreed to change that, and going forward, we're going to improve based on the article and this experience. Well, I have one question. I'll end with a question, but it's great that we're reaching out to outside experts and vendors on the architecture and design and making it a more resilient and robust system. But my question is, where are we today? I know that the description before was we tried to switch over to the 2019 physical servers, and we had to revert back to the 2008. What is the current status of those systems? Are we whole again, or are to where we were before this event, and so forth?
So Greg, maybe that's a quick answer, and I would suspect that in future reports, we'll have a broader discussion on your status, including some of the Jason's recommendations and next steps. Greg, do you just want to give a quick?
Yeah, so right now the DHCP servers are 2019 are in service and are putting out the addresses to the broadband network.
Yep, that was my understanding. Okay. All right, and I guess just one last comment, Dave. I know that you guys are working on this, and Steve committed to this as well. In terms of one of the other action items was a better approach to communication to customers, and I would expect that in a future meeting, you'll tell us what our approach is going to be and what you're doing around that as well. I don't want to skip that, but I think that's important.
No,
Gordon?
that absolutely is
Sorry.
important, and
Yeah.
we will come back to you with that.
I know
Okay,
you're on
and,
that.
and-
Gordon.
and just quickly, the point being, when you talk about, Dave, you mentioned a second ago that you're going to have incident response templates or plans for how to handle particular outages or disasters or whatever. I think that you should actually include in that plan communication. So,
Yep.
you know, and for instance, this was a outage at the central office, right? So it potentially affected the whole town. So that means that the messaging about it has to reflect that, to say, hey, this is a bigger thing perhaps than just a particular branch in the network anyway. So good to think about it ahead of time.
And Dave, I think in the meeting, if I heard it correctly, so this, I think of it as a disaster recovery plan, because that's the situation, that this plan is not just staff, it includes your vendor responsibilities and SLAs and all that stuff too. So I'm assuming it will cover all of that.
Yeah, it needs to, for sure.
Right. Okay. Steve,
I think excellent. This is great feedback and excellent points all around. Just in terms of the plain English, we worked hard to put out a statement after the outage explaining as best we could in plain English, given the complex technical nature of what had happened. So that is on the website for CMLP if people want to kind of get a digestible version of what happened. The thing I'll say is, this thing was an evolving thing, and I don't think it wasn't like a fiber break. I think I said this at the last meeting. It wasn't like a single incident. There was a buildup over a number of years for a variety of reasons, of circumstances not really directly related to an outage, but that all had a contributing factor to what ended up happening. And I think that's and I'm sure we've all been and through our professional lives a part of something that had kind of that creep function where no one variable looked really ominous, and then all of a sudden something happens and oh my goodness, all these variables have combined to create this situation. And so I think Jason and David and Greg have done a good job explaining, we wish we knew before that, but what those variables were and how we're trying to be more resilient. And the other thing is the town is actually very good at crisis management and crisis communications. We just were not in this instance. And that's something that I don't think had been developed for broadband. And that was a part of the evolution of the broadband business, which is still relatively new. So I think what I hope to give the board confidence in and the community is that we'll have a really good incident response plan because we have them all over through different departments that we can model off of. And so we don't need to invent something from scratch. I think there was a comment about using the code red, our reverse 911 system. And we gave that some thought, but we knew it was not a townwide incident. If it were, we believe something's going to affect townwide services, we certainly would have gone to that. But when we use that system for something that most people aren't experiencing, the 5,500 households aren't experiencing, people call us and say, take us off the list, which defeats the purpose of the system. And so there are reasons why we use it and reasons why we don't. And, I think that I just want to give that little bit of feedback to let you know that we do think about this stuff every single day. We didn't do it in advance of this outage.
thank you. I see a hand raised by David Allen. David, you have a question?
Actually, Wendy, not a question. Thank you. Um, Noticing Stephen's description here, crises of this sort that build from a variety of sources depend, in my experience, crucially for their successful resolution, and this was not successful. Let's just be straightforward about that. Depend upon leadership. Leadership at all levels. Needless to say, you've got to have the folks down in the trenches making it all happen. I suggest having that in view as we look forward to how we get a better outcome another time. If I might, to build on Pam's observation, again, to speak simply, plainly, several times there has been mention of, shall we say, non-standard configuration in the network, and perhaps that contributed to the problems here. There could lie in the background the suggestion that somehow or another we can trace all this back to a prior administration and quote, it's their fault. Nobody has said that, but there's been that possibility for interpretation each time this point has been made. As Pam has pointed out, the question is, how did the current leadership engage with the problems? To put it most bluntly, why didn't they know the problems were there? That's a quite stringent way to put the point, but let's put it positively. We look to, and this is combining the first thought here, we look to the leadership, again, at all levels, starting with the board, but certainly going down to town manager, our CIO, to our telecoms manager. We look to our leadership at all levels to get answers to those questions. And hopefully what's being worked on by the board right now will be a process review at the board level and on down the line, so that another time we will have a response. We will have taken curative measures in advance when they're needed. And so I have a point from earlier segment here. I'm going to leave it for now and I'll come back to it later.
Okay, thank you. I want to just remind people we're running a little behind on our agenda, but I think we can roll right into a related topic on our fiber broadband study committee. So I have not had a discussion about this. Alice, I know that you forwarded a revised version of this charge. I don't know if this came from the select board or where that came from, if it's blessed by the select board. Can you just comment quickly on that? I know you're muted right now.
So the version that I received was an edited version from Gal Hire. I don't know if the select board has reviewed the edited version. I provided it to all of you as a working document, but it probably is, we should be commenting on the select board version, which is what has been officially prepared and written, and we can respond to the select board version.
Okay. I personally just have to comment that version was missing all the roles and responsibilities of the charter. So I really had a very difficult time commenting on that because I didn't understand what the real chart was. So I don't know if others want to comment on that around which document to review. I know that time is of the essence here because the charge is to finish this in 6 months. So let me just ask board members, are you prepared to comment on the initial version that was sent? Or do we feel that we should be collecting comments on Gail's version?
I've had some time this morning to review both. I could feel we do need to have a discussion to move things forward, but I think I need more time to read through Gail's details to see how that kind of fits with Article 41 and how it passed, and what my feelings are on her edits. So as for the charge, as it was sent to us from the select board, it says things like, in addition, the finance committee shall appoint a representative to be a liaison to the task force, but yet it's referred to as a committee. Simple definitions like, is it a committee, which I generally view as something that continually goes on, and a task force like the Energy Futures Task Force, which is temporary. I think we should maybe look at those kind of naming conventions. I also feel that 6 months is not enough time for any committee to do research. I think that it should be on 1 year or until the completion of the report. And under the duties and responsibilities, outreach to HOAs, I think, is got to be listed as a critical component, because with only 7% of the properties not reached and 22% of citizens in town not reached, that leads to me to think that it's the multifamily housing, and the HOAs are usually, I know that with electric vehicle infrastructure, we had to do a special program to help out the HOAs figure out electric vehicle infrastructure, because adoption was low in those communities.
Brian, just HOAs, can you just repeat
Oh,
for me the full?
homeowners association,
Okay.
sorry. Yeah, the condo boards or the
Okay, that's, yeah.
multifamily boards.
Just want to make sure I understood what you were referring to.
Sure.
So it sounds like you might have some feedback. Dave, I didn't mean to ignore that. I don't know what information was provided to you for the board. Did you have any expectations from the select board around this topic?
No, I mean, I was
Feedback.
provided the same things that you
Okay,
guys received from Alex,
Okay.
and,
okay,
so
Thank
no.
you. All right, Pam?
I just wanted, I guess I would like to read whatever the select board
Yeah.
has decided it is wanting to be its draft for us to look at. And it sounds kind of like things are kind of on two different tracks. I'd rather have the select board digest what has been provided in terms of public comment, and then after it digests that, give it to us to review, because it's their thing. So I'm not inclined to try to do, dueling commenting here. So I'd like to wait till we hear from the select board.
Yep, I completely concur. That's where my opinion is too.
Okay.
Alice, or do you have any comments, Alice?
So we actually, I want to remind everybody, we have the select board's version that they offered to us for comment for this meeting.
Right.
The thing that I think I agree with Brian, that a 6 month term, if we're starting a month from now to even look at the board again, looks like a very short window to be able for a committee to be seated, get up and going, to agree on their charge. I mean, I think both Brian and Pam know that intimately from the Energy Futures Task Force. Just the startup of a committee takes at least one whole meeting. That it seems to me very rushed to try and have this done in, say, 5 months' time. And I'd rather we get this right. If we're looking at expanding our services, we have to know that we've got our ducks in order to do that all the way through the system. It's not an independent study of one particular aspect of growth. So I would just caution us about rushing something to meet a specific deadline and get it right when we go off looking at the problems with the systems, our customer response. I also just question, well, maybe it's not even a question. Is the membership correct on the committee as proposed by the select board? So that's my big comment is.
Okay. I think there's a challenge, because I think the warrant article as approved required some report, but maybe that's not the end of the committee. Maybe there's interim reports, right? So I think the select board has to review that as well. So Gordon, you had your hand raised.
I'd say that I appreciate very much the feedback and the comments that I've heard. Brian, I thought that you raised some excellent points, and I think that if I forget who said it, but the idea of a very quick turnaround on this isn't necessarily the best thing. I think some people want a quick turnaround in order to get in order to use the output of this task force as the basis for a warrant article in the next cycle. And, I can understand the urgency on that, but I don't think that that's putting the cart before the horse. So if there's, what I'm kind of interested in hearing is if this committee thinks that we could actually provide some initial feedback to the select board right now about what we're seeing here. And if we could do that in this month, then hopefully we'd be able to get something that will be happier with in August. And then just something else to think about. We don't have to decide right now, but who among us is going to serve as liaison. The idea of a liaison is very common in committees. For instance, right now we've got a liaison from the select board. That doesn't mean that the liaison necessarily votes. And a liaison role is usually a lot less heavy than a seat. So, maybe we'd be more able to get a member of this light board to serve in a liaison role than in a seated role on this task force.
Okay, Brian?
Yeah, picking up on that point, I think that's a very good idea, Gordon. In fact, I would suggest that we at this meeting decide who is going to be the point person of this board to work on the broadband, being the liaison in the future, and to work with Matt Johnson, who's the liaison from the select board to this committee, on development, continued refinement, and actually make a completed version of this first draft of the charge, and have that prepared for the next meeting that we have, or have the select board also take it up in the meantime. So that what I'm hoping is that we don't just leave here saying we have more work to do, but we actually have a plan to get work done, such that the next meeting that we have a document that is pretty much ready, just needs to be approved, but has wiggle room to be adjusted. I want it to be more complete than this document we received from the select board, which has large sections that are undefined.
I agree with you. So I guess I would hesitate unless, well, let me just ask the board. Would the board want to assign an individual board member to help consolidate individual feedback either from this meeting and or additional comments received from board members? We have the ability to do that. If you want to assign an individual to do that, someone could consolidate that feedback and send it to the board if they need to. What are people's thoughts? Is that a reasonable approach?
I would agree.
Does anyone object to that
It
approach?
sounds to me a little bit like the process we already used for collecting comments on minutes.
Correct. That's where I'm going.
Wendy, Matt Johnson has his hand up and he probably could provide some.
Okay, that would be helpful. Matt, do you want to comment while we're reviewing this? You're on mute. There you go.
Yeah, just to say that the select board did just get the, I'm sorry about my camera is not.
It's okay.
So the select board just did get a copy, of course, of Gail Heyer's draft of the charge. And I do believe that we will be reviewing that, and that it, speaking just for myself, I would find it very helpful to get input from the light board about your views on both drafts, because I think that we hope to take the feedback on both into account as we make any further revisions. So I mean, I understand the reticence to run ahead of the select board, but really you all have, I think, expertise that, and just familiarity with the issue that really could be helpful in us evaluating and producing a better draft in the future.
So it seems like the approach is to collect feedback and send that more formally directly to the select board. And it
Now,
sounds
one
like,
other problem I just wanted to mention, sorry to cut in, but
No.
is that I think tentatively we were going to look at this next week, but maybe we should put that off. Because again, it makes sense to get the full set of inputs. So when do you think that would be available?
I'm going to go next. So I'm going to ask the board.
All right, well, I'll hold for now.
All right, good. So let me just ask the board. I know I've reviewed both versions of it. And all board members have both versions. So would the board be willing to put together some, and I don't want, it shouldn't be a revision and a red line version of it, some bullet points around comments for each version. And, some may have the same bullets on them, but would people be willing to forward that to an individual on the board and have the board consolidate those bullets and forward that to the select board? Would people be comfortable with that approach?
I would.
Okay.
I would
Yeah.
too, but I would ask us to copy each other on these comments so that we don't reiterate comments unless this is
So
an open
Yeah,
meeting.
there's going to be
Okay.
an open meeting problem. So I think that we need to send individual comments to an individual, like we do with
Right,
minutes, and
right,
that
right.
individual can redistribute to the board, and then send it. We could probably, we have a timing issue here because it's not a lot of time. So what I would suggest is that if we could, if this board and the members would be comfortable sending bullets to, I don't know, is it fair to say by end of day Thursday? And Brian, I'm going to put you on the spot here. Could you consolidate the bullets and get it to the select board for Monday morning? Or I don't know, Matt, when you would need them? Maybe Sunday night?
Again, if timing is an issue, I can ask the chair to defer that item. We will have
Okay.
in fact, we'll have another meeting, relatively soon. I would say though that the next meeting we have is a focused meeting. We're not really intending to talk about other issues other than our FY22 goals. So it would barely be the meeting on the 26th
Okay.
where we would really have, a broader opportunity to discuss this.
Okay,
So that gives some more time,
it does.
both for you all to compose
Right.
your comments
Okay.
as well as to compile them.
Right, okay. So, Brian?
Wendy, would you like me to be the person to collate them? Because I'm willing to. I just didn't know if you wanted me to.
Well, that's where I'm going next. So you had volunteered already. So I'd like to ask if you'd be willing to do that, to collect feedback. And then if we've got a little more time, if you could consolidate them. I don't feel like we have to wordsmith the charter, but give feedback in like a bulleted form on each one. And then after all those comments are consolidated, redistribute them to the board and then give the board maybe a day or two to give any additional feedback. And then we can forward that on to the board. So if we can set some dates, and you tell me if this is okay. So if maybe by the end of, I don't know, Friday, can people give feedback in bullet form to you, Brian, and then you can consolidate and redistribute by, I don't know, Monday, and then ask for feedback by Tuesday or by Wednesday, and then we can send that version off to the board on Wednesday.
So Thursday through Tuesday, I'll be in Pennsylvania.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm going to my sister-in-law's wedding, but
Okay. Yeah.
I'm sure I'll have time in between and I'll be checking email.
Okay. So
Sorry, Matt, let me make sure. So the July 26th meeting is when the select board will discuss?
I believe that is the case. I mean, we haven't set our agenda yet and I can't speak for the chair, but I do believe that is, in our backlog of topics that we expect to cover.
And then, so
It
Matt,
looks
when
like
would you
Stephen
need?
had a comment.
Yeah, so Matt, when would you need feedback for the 26th? And I'll come back to Stephen.
I was just about to answer that question.
Oh, great. Good timing. Go ahead.
The agenda generally gets set on the Wednesday before.
the agenda. Okay, so would materials for the meeting on the 26th need to
I,
then
I
be-
think it would be great if we could get it by then, because that would be July 21st. And
Okay.
the idea then is to realize that, yep, we've got some input, so
Yep.
we have something to talk about.
The materials can be maybe by the end of the day Thursday, so it can go with Friday's packet. But we would want to know that we will have the materials
Exactly.
in hand by Wednesday.
Okay, end of day Wednesday, like by 5?
We usually meet in the morning, so maybe midday.
Okay. Brian, I'm going to ask you, so you tell me if you think what would work for you. Do you think you can support collecting feedback from the board and putting something together by
Yeah,
the 21st?
yeah, I'll
Okay.
figure it out. I'll
Okay.
get it done. It's a bullet list. I'm good with those.
Yeah, just bullets. I don't want to make it complicated.
Absolutely.
I
Yeah.
am not going to wordsmith.
Less is more.
Yep. No, bullets are good. It's the
All right.
issue is feedback. So, okay, so I think that's great. So we have an approach. If I recall, I thought somebody had their hand up. So Brian, I'll get there. Okay, Gordon, last comment.
Well, one possible, and this is wordsmithing, so forgive me. Maybe this should be reserved for the emails that we're going to exchange. But instead of saying one member of the light board chosen by the light board, we could say one person chosen by the light board. And like, for instance, the Climate Action Committee, the light board had that prerogative, and we chose a former, or nominated anyway, Brian Krauts, who was a former light board member, and he was so there's an example of where we can find someone with a similar skill set, but doesn't necessarily have to be one of us. That's one point. The other is, very quickly, that there is a guiding principle in town government that's emerged recently, that we shouldn't have one person sitting on multiple boards. And the idea is to try and spread the goodness, bring in more people into the public process. And so that'd be another reason why I prefer not to have. Okay.
Okay. And so that feedback and others should be forwarded to Brian.
Okay.
That'd be great. All right. I'm just reminding people we're running out of time, so I'm going to try to keep us moving along. Brian, quickly.
Just to the, yes, very quickly. So I will send out an email with both documents attached to the members of the board, blind copied. Please reply to that with your input.
Great. Thank you, Brian. And I appreciate you doing that. I do see a couple hands raised, and of course, Gail Heyer is one of them, and she obviously needs to speak to this too. So Gail, can we have you comment?
Hi, thank you. And Gordon, I'm glad you raised that that question. The wording in the warrant was one member of the select board, sorry, one member of the light board. I don't have it in front of me, appointed by the light board, I guess it was. So I don't know if it has to be a member of the light board, or can it be a designee? I think it makes sense to have it be a designee if you folks find someone that you think is qualified. So I don't, maybe that's a, government question.
Yep. Probably. Okay, great.
So yeah, but thank you for your attention, and I appreciate the efforts to move this along, because we, do have a short time frame, and as we all know, broadband is very important to a lot of people. So thanks for making the time for this.
Great. Thank you. Sorry, I can't turn that off. Mark Howell, I see your hand raised. You're muted. Yep, there you go.
Good morning, thanks. And I too also am concerned about the time frame. And of course, we were working with the framework that Gail originally proposed, with a focus on finishing the fiber construction exclusively. And so this is a little bit in the direction of a comment that I would, propose that Matt and the select board consider, as well as the light board. But I think recent events have clearly shown that there are a broader set of issues than just fiber construction that need to be considered for this business. And so one way kind of out of this might be to consider sort of narrowly what the article required, which is a report on fiber construction completion by the next town meeting. I would have probably preferred that the language said a future town meeting rather than the next, especially considering the compression in schedules given, when our last town meeting occurred. However, it didn't say that. So we're kind of stuck with that. But again, focus on fiber completion and some sort of report along those lines, and other issues like the status of the business, the policies, and some of the things that I've raised in previous comments and have suggested need to be addressed. They could go on. That said, to Brian's comment about is it a task force or a committee, I feel very strongly that this, in fact, should be something that is styled more like the Energy Futures Task Force. It's designed to provide input to the active boards to set some potential objectives, policies, and some operating guidelines, which then become the kind of questions that Gordon was raising. What does the light board need to be doing over time to continue to help to manage this business alongside of its other businesses? So it's definitely something that should end. Should it end in 6 months? I don't think so. It's too big a job for that. It should take a little bit longer, but maybe the job can be partitioned in a way to meet the sort of requirements of Article 41, while also being useful for the broader purposes of setting a longer term objective, strategic objectives for the broadband business. Thanks for the time. I appreciate your focus on all of these issues. They're very important to us.
Thanks, Mark. Actually, that's a good idea. If they can find a way to structure that and address what's in the original warrant article, I think that would be the select board's challenge. So we'll see what comes out of that. I'm going to remind people that we are behind.
I do
on our
have one
agenda.
question,
Oh, Matt,
which is
sorry.
what is the date of the draft select board charge?
The date it was issued from the select board?
Yep.
I don't know. I didn't receive that document
It
originally.
was June 30th, 21.
Well, that's at the top of one of these documents that we were given. The fiber broadband.
But they both say
committee charge.
6:30. They both say
Oh, right.
6:30/21. Sorry. So that's not helpful.
The problem is that we have not had that item on our agenda.
Right.
So I actually don't know the provenance of that draft.
Oh,
Now,
Terry
come to think of it.
Oh, okay. So I don't think that would preclude us from giving you feedback, Matt, and I'll let you
Yeah,
follow up with
it
the rest
does
of your
create
board.
something of a mystery, however.
Yep.
Okay, and
All right.
Brian, or I think that we actually need, in order to talk meaningfully about these, we're going to have to give bullets on 2 different drafts. So we'll have to have a way of identifying the 2 drafts.
So we have them, and I think Brian Fold has already said he will reattach them
Okay,
to
great.
everyone in
Okay,
an email.
so-
Okay, so there'll be no question about which one we're talking about. So, okay.
Okay, thank you.
Do people have a preference? I was planning on putting the 2 documents attached to one email. Would you like to have separate conversations on each draft? I think it's better to
No.
combine them.
You can combine them, just make it clear which one, put, maybe even change the draft and put like a tag or a new title or a new version number or something in there, just so that we all know what we're talking about.
One is redlined.
Well,
So
there's
we know
a
which one.
clean and a red line version
Right.
of one. So the red line might be helpful, but we need to move on. Brian, I'm going to let you take the discussion. Matt did request separate feedback on the 2 different documents. So if you can present that in a way that works, that's great. Your discretion.
Okay, and you can
Okay.
demote me.
That's great. All right. I'll leave that to Dave. I'm not going to do that. Thanks, Matt. All right. We need to move forward. We have another important agenda item. And so, Dave, are we ready to proceed with the update on our next agenda item? I've lost it. Yeah. So on the advanced meter infrastructure. Sorry.
Yep, we'll be brief. I'm going to ask Laura to give a quick overview on where we are.
Actually, Carol, did you want to provide the overview? You're muted.
Muted.
No, go ahead.
Okay.
Okay, fine. So where we are on the AMI project is the consultant is finalizing the document that is listed as the systems evaluation and goals. This was sort of the first deliverable on the project, which outlines, how are our current systems configured. This is important when we consider integrating a new advanced metering and communication system. It also will outline the goals that we're trying to accomplish. We do expect that document to be finalized and available before the next select board meeting. And so we will distribute that when it does become available. At the same time, the consultant is working on the benefits quantification study. This will put some dollars and details into what can we expect financially from a new AMI system. Where will the benefits be? Where will the costs be? What does the overall picture look like? We are also currently discussing plans for the stakeholders meeting, which is to occur. We've set a date of September 8th for that. And that's an important component, as you all know, of this process, is to obtain stakeholder feedback. And the final sort of deliverable from the current consultant will be, in fact, the procurement, well, not the final document, the second to final document will be the procurement strategy. How do we want to go out and request the systems, the hardware and the software that would be required to support a new system? And then after that, which will incorporate the stakeholder feedback. And then after that, we would actually be preparing the RFP documents that would go out and request the system that we're talking about. So, a lot of this will depend on which vendor is selected. Some of the lead times in terms of contracting for some of the larger companies like the Itrons, the Landis and Gears, can be a year, we've heard from other municipalities. We're hoping that's not the case. But realistically, I think we're not looking at installations of this system until 2023, likely at the earliest, is my current view. So that's where we are. That's what the plans are. Carol and I are devoting a lot of time to this because it's a critical element of the electric business. Measuring electricity usage and being able to bill for it is critical. And so this is a very important project that we're all focused on.
I do have just a couple of quick things to add to that. Once we do get the goals document from the consultant, we'll get those up on a website, because I know that the Light Board had requested that they be posted along with any other documentation. The other part of this project also is involved developing a communications plan, and the consultant had requested that we do a customer survey. That survey will be, the online survey fielding piece will be wrapping up on Friday, this Friday, the 16th. And then next week will be devoted to doing any phone fielding that needs to get done. We've had a fairly good response so far. We've had something like 875 residential responses. We were hoping to get 300, so we've far exceeded our expectation there. On the commercial side, we've only had 3 responses so far on the online survey. So this is where the research firm will devote their time making some phone calls and trying to do the survey by phone. We were hoping to get 50 responses from commercial customers. So I don't know, it seems like that's going to be a stretch. But just in looking at previous surveys that we've done in the past for customer satisfaction surveys, on the commercial side, we usually do have a very difficult time reaching our goals and collecting responses. So the research firm then will start their data analysis and wrap that up to do their final report to us for August 10th. And I think that's all I had.
So Carol, what is the percent response? So 875 residential, you said it was a good response from a percentage wise of who we were targeting.
So we had, I don't have a calculator handy here. We had 38% of our account base that we had email addresses for. And then of that 38%, then we've had 869 residential customers respond back.
Okay. All right, so the survey was issued via email?
Yes.
I'm saying, okay. Okay.
That's the same survey that's online, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's also available online.
Okay, I just wanted, yeah, that's where I
And a
was
lot of
thinking.
people saw it through the online version.
Yeah, okay,
If I did my arithmetic correctly, that would be about a 25% response rate.
okay.
Thanks, Laura.
Oh,
Thanks,
great.
Laura. Appreciate it. That's good. Okay. Brian, question?
Yeah, so Carol, you mentioned for AMI creating a web page to give updates and status on the project. Was that a correct understanding of what you said?
Well, I believe that the Light Board had requested that we post documents, any of our final documents from our working with the consultant.
Can you add to that page, just because I wrote as many notes as I could from what Laura said, but the timeline of the consultant's work or the steps, I'd be helpful to have that as meeting materials beforehand, or have it through a website so that we know what the process is for setting up the criteria for the procurement.
Absolutely.
That'd be helpful.
And of course, actually getting that materials to the board before it's posted in case we get questions would be helpful too.
For the, all I had going into this meeting was a line item on an agenda that said AMI. I didn't know what we were going to talk about. I had no meeting materials.
Yep, we can pull that together.
Yeah. Other questions from board members? Gordon.
This may be slightly off topic, but I'll just put this in as kind of a something to keep in mind as we head into the new year, that we really do need to establish a policy for, or make it possible for people who are on the time of use rate to also have solar. So those two are excluded. I'm not sure the extent to which this AMI study figures into that, but it's just something that Brian brought up early, as soon as he came on the board actually last year, and that I support completely. So we do need to address that.
And to build on that, yes, in order for us to get the specs right for what we need in AMI, we need to know what we're going to ask of it within a rate structure. So as Gordon pointed out, I've been the guy who has been commenting on time of use, so much so that some people believe we've already discussed it, and we haven't. I've been asking for those discussions. I was promised those back in January and February after the November rate approval, and we still haven't come around to setting a rate, which is a core responsibility of this board.
So Gordon and Brian, very much appreciate that. You will note that that discussion is featured prominently on the strategic plan timeline that's posted on our website, that is a key responsibility of the board during this time. I leave it to the board leadership to determine the exact appropriate timing, within that larger time frame to actually have those discussions, but it's clear that it needs to happen. And in the background, Brian and Gordon, you should also be aware, as you know, our current metering technology does not allow for the simultaneous measurement of the time of use and the net metering. We have already asked our current consultants, whether or not that technology is available anywhere, that we want it. It's a need that we have. And so that is already part of the consideration when we set up what our needs are for the new system.
Just a technical note, would having a battery change technically having a battery in a gateway could perhaps affect the technology choices because it could potentially turn off the solar output, and you could design such a system that would never export. Anyway, I'm sorry, that's a technical point. Doesn't really belong in this meeting, but anyway. Thank you.
So as Laura said, it is our responsibility to set those rates, and we'll talk about that at a future meeting in terms of timeline. We will in the fall also be talking about any rate changes for 1/1. And I'm assuming, David, that's a discussion that we will start probably in earnest in September, because as you get the board budget prepped. So,
Yeah, that will be a discussion we have. You know, we just set rates in January.
Right.
Based on the cost of service study. So we should review those annually.
Mhm.
Do not need to change. They may, well, you know, but we should have a discussion regardless.
yep. Okay. So we will address that. Any other questions from the board on AMI? No? Okay. I am not seeing any hands raised. Oh, wait, I do. Gail Hire. Gail?
Thank you. Yeah, so I had a question about the communications plan and the survey in particular. So I guess I'm a little taken aback by the fact that the only people being surveyed are the ones for whom you have email addresses. Because it seems like that
That's not
would
true.
sort of slant
That's
the
not true.
survey.
Yep.
That's not true.
No, because it's available on the website.
Okay, well, how are people who don't check email and who maybe don't go on the website supposed to know about the survey? Like, I think it might be biasing the survey towards people who are, you know, maybe younger, more technically savvy. I don't know, I was a little taken aback by that. So, I mean, how are
So-
people supposed to know about the survey?
Isn't there a insert in the bill?
Was it? Yeah. Gail, isn't that, I'm sorry, Carol, isn't that how we advertise it in the bill?
Yes, and we also, I believe, put something out on Twitter, news and notices, just letting people know about the survey as well. And, you know, my staff was also informed that if they had any customers calling to let us know that they didn't have internet access and couldn't complete the survey online, that we would work with them separately to put them in touch with a research firm to do a phone survey.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. I
Mark?
see another hand raised. Mark Howell.
Yeah, I did receive several different notifications about that survey. I would just say that the survey was billed as a customer satisfaction survey. And then when I actually took the survey, I realized it was about AMI. So I think that one could have actually been notified that there was a survey being taken and not really understood what the actual purpose of the survey was if you look at the communications. And I know how hard it is to get that message out there, but you know, I was actually surprised, and that the notifications originally came out on June 28th, which I think most people would recognize as the day when the broadband system was you know, still in the throes of the major outages. So it was easily ignored, and one could have been likely not to do that. But I do have my email address on you know, in my record, and have been asked to fill it out multiple times since then. But I would just point out that it wasn't clear that it was really focused on AMI since it was listed as customer sat.
Okay, great. All right. I do not see other hands raised. And I guess just a clarification, Carol, to follow up on the results of the survey. I assume you said they'd be available in early August. I assume you'll distribute that to the board as well. We don't know
Yes.
when we're meeting, but okay. Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so we have come to the, our last agenda item is liaison and public comments. I don't have any liaison comments. I haven't had any committee meetings. Anyone else?
You have a public comment.
Oh, sorry. Yep, I'm getting there now. David Allen.
Going back to the backlog that Greg told us about, there is a fundamental trade-off here, which we're all familiar with, goes back to the very setup of Concord broadband. We can spend more money and we can get folks on board, or we cannot spend money and it drags out would be one way to put it. This is a huge number of folk who aren't up. I don't think you have an answer now and shouldn't have an answer now, but I most strongly commend to you answering this question, whether or not we need to spend significantly more money than we have spent in the past to get folks up here. That's obviously going to be in the form of money spent on folks outside, light plant coming in and making it happen. Personally, I lean on the side of getting people on board. When you're a startup, it's one thing. We're not a startup anymore. We have a reputation to uphold, which has been very badly tarnished here. I strongly encourage considering spending some serious money to get folks up here. Guess what? It may put us in the red. That's how you do a startup. This is still a startup from that point of view. I'll be interested in your input on this subject at the next board meeting. Thanks.
Thank you, David. And I know, Greg, you had spoken already about the strategy potentially of using outside consultants. And so I would expect at our next meeting, you'll have a report on your approach to addressing the backlog. And I think if I'm not correct, what do we say our typical annual installation is? About 175? Am I just misremembering that?
No, we used to target around 300 a year.
300? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. It's a different number. Okay. So it's not impossible to achieve with some outside help. Gordon.
If we're done with this topic, I noticed that there's a question posted by V. Carl.
Okay.
Can I read it?
Sure. And then we'll come
Okay.
back to Pamela Dritt. Yep.
Okay, all right. V. Carl asks, is there still interest retaining an outside consultant on general broadband technology, 5G, et cetera, not outage related? And his iPad won't unmute for raised hand, so that's why I'm reading it for him.
So Dave or Greg, I assume that you're already pursuing that, but let you speak to that.
Yeah, we've been, briefly discussing the 5G scenario in town. Obviously been sidetracked a little, haven't got too deep into it yet, but it is something that we need to talk about.
So future topic, perhaps. Okay. Pamela Dritt, I see your hands raised.
Yes, thanks. Pamela Dritt, 13 Concord Green, Unit 4. Two quick questions. How much of the fiber optic cable system is buried and how much is up on the phone lines? Also, I have a friend who says that the town put the conduit from the street into his house before he actually bought, as the fiber was being run down the street. And I thought, that's not possible. But is it? Did you actually install conduit to the dwellings as you went?
So in general, Pamela, we don't install the conduit from the street to the house. Unless it's an area that we're going from an overhead to underground conversion, where we do put the electric service conduits, then we would put a communications conduit as well. So generally that doesn't happen, when we're just running fiber on a road.
Then you might have been doing an underground of all of the utilities on that road, and that's why he had conduit?
Yeah, I don't know what road you're speaking of, but if
Belknap Street.
Yeah, so Belknap Street is a conversion area where we put in conduits to convert it from overhead to underground. So when we did the service conduits, we would have included conduits for communications as well.
I know that Concord Green has underground electricity. They're going to pave the roads. I'm very frustrated with the board, but this seems to be the opportunity to upgrade and continue putting conduit for everything in Concord Green. Can we please get that done? Otherwise, Concord Green will not be a modern place to live.
We have spoken to the board over there numerous times about this topic. And I believe they reached out not too long ago.
The
So
board is a problem, in my opinion.
Challenge.
Yeah.
So, sorry, Dave, can you answer the other question, which was how much buried, how much of the fiber is buried versus on the phone line? Do we even know that off the top?
yeah,
of our head?
so that's a little tricky. We haven't run those
Okay.
exact numbers.
Okay.
What I can say is on the electric side, it's about 50-50, 50% underground, 50% overhead.
Okay.
I would say on the fiber side, it's not 50-50. It's probably more like 60-40. Because we have some areas that everyone knows that we don't have conduits in some subdivisions. So that would decrease the number a little bit, but I don't have the exact number off the top of my head.
Okay, maybe we can do a follow-up, but that 60% is probably overhead, right? More
Yes.
overhead? Okay, just checking.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Brian, and we're almost at 9:30.
Just a very quick comment. I just wanted to say that, Pamela Dritt brings up a very good point about the HOAs and the multifamily. I think it's important for us to, Dave, if you can clarify this, the responsibility of the utility versus the responsibility of the property owner when it comes to installation of fiber.
So the installation of fiber on private property is the responsibility of the property owner, not the light department currently. The only time we actually do the installation of the conduits is when we are converting a road from overhead to underground. And we bear the expense of bringing the conduits to the house in those particular cases. That's, the long-standing practice, over a number of years. That's the way it's been done. We do have an electric service conversion. So if someone wants to convert their service from overhead to underground, we have a reimbursement program for that as well. So again, they would hire a contractor to do it, and then they would submit their paperwork and get a reimbursement. So those are really the three different pieces.
Well, clearly this will be one of the barriers that's identified by the study commission as well, right?
Yeah.
And we'll look forward to some recommendations on that. Okay. All right, I do not see hands raised by the board or outside attendees, so I would entertain a motion for ending our light board meeting for today.
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
And second, thank you all, appreciate it. Oh, wait, now I have to do a roll call, sorry. All right, Brian. Yes, okay, Pam,
Yes.
Alice,
Yes.
Gordon.
Yes. Oh, wait, hold it. One last thing. I just wanted to thank Alice and Brian for their roles in the previous in this year. So thank you for both for your service.
Thank you.
Okay. Aye.
Concur. And I as well. So thank you
Me
all.
too.
All right. So thank you all. Appreciate it. Have a great day.